What's happening, everyone? And welcome to El Chile Boxing Talk. Got the homies here with me as always. George with Off the Ropes Boxing and MMA, and the legendary YTBC. Well, he's a legend. No Paul Boxianos. What's happening, man?
Hey, bros, how's it going?
Man, I am glad to be starting this up with you. I'm going to give a shout out to people who are in the chat early. JC, who's here first. As always, I want to give a shout out to Remy here, who says he'll be back in a little bit. Yeah, man, we are starting earlier and earlier. As you guys know, the guys work overnights, man. So we are getting this thing started early. So, wherever you're watching us, this is an AM Mexican morning show. I thought I would just get that out of the way for us. Now all we need are like some beautiful women to hang out with us and kind of dance. You know what I mean? After every segment, somebody page Annalie Jaramillo. Tell her we need her. You know what I mean?
we need a weather report real quick.
Oh, you think so?
Oh, yeah.
All right. All right. Hey, is that good, George? Good enough for you?
Oh man, I'm fulfilled. Well,
those are the only two clips I got of the Mujeres dancing. You know what I mean? So the rest of the way, we're just gonna start talking some boxing, man. So we're glad you're here with us. We got a loaded show, dude. We have to talk about the Spence versus Crawford fallout. We're gonna go right to it, and after that, we're gonna talk about Crawford's next fight. We're gonna talk about Lomanchenko. We're gonna talk about Wilder's pay-per-view buys, and then we're gonna review the 1938 Fight of the Year, Henry Armstrong versus Lou Ambers. It's a loaded show, but let's get right to it, man. As y'all know, shit started happening. It's only all about a week old, really. It's only been about a week old. I think this happened on Thursday, right? Spence pipes up on Twitter, and we learned a little bit before that there was like some kind of disgruntledness going on. Like, I think there were some people reporting that there was stalling going on, and then Errol Spence comes out on Twitter and says, dude's been stalling for months. I could have fought in November. And then he says, I've been fighting at this weight for over a decade, and it's not easy or fun. All right. And then the next day, we get news that Terrence Crawford and David Avanesyan have signed contracts for a welterweight fight. It's going to happen in Omaha on December 10th, right? With the, it's not a new streaming app, but nobody had really ever heard of it. They don't have many followers, and it's going to be on pay-per-view for $39.95. And there's been a lot of fallout, and this is what Crawford had to say about it all. He said that he was really looking forward to the Spence fight. He started communicating with Al Heyman back in June, and unfortunately, they represent a fighter in Errol Spence who didn't want the fight as badly as I did. I agreed to all of their BS, and they've been dragging their ass for months. Spence was nowhere to be found while I was trying to make the deal. Once I'm successful again against Avanesyan, my plan is still the same, to whoop Errol Spence's ass. George, this has all happened kind of quickly. Let's focus on Spence versus Crawford not happening. And, we have the right to, because, the Mexicans are going to chime in. And here's the other thing I have to say about it. Like, we've hardly ever talked about this fight. So we got a lot to say. Like, we don't really cover it that often. We don't even go on all that often. So these are fresh takes. Maybe you heard it before, but all I could say is, we might be more objective than most. And we love talking the business, So, George, tell us, man, like, what were your thoughts about Spence versus Crawford not happening? Do you place any blame anywhere? From the outside looking in, what do you think about all this?
Shit, dude. I mean, I am upset, and I'm sure most of us are all upset because we know exactly what this fight, the magnitude of this fight. It's definitely one of the top two fights right now in 2022. I mean, of course, anytime Canelo fights, it's always it's like I'm not gonna call it a spectacle, but it's always fireworks and all the fun stuff because it's Canelo. He fights in those months, representing the Mexican people. So, I mean, apart from that, I mean, it's an exciting fight, and it's of course to see who the best guy at 147 is. So, these talks have been going on. I think at the end of last year, because I remember January coming around, and then Keith Thurman's name's been thrown in there. So they're saying Keith Thurman and Terrence Crawford could be mixing it up. So when this was actually being spoken about, I remember coming on D Styles channel, and I think we were all asked what we thought was going to happen this year. I said I didn't think the fight was going to happen. I thought maybe next year. I was thinking it would be Keith Thurman, because that's what it was looking like. Keith Thurman was calling out Terrence Bud Crawford. which still isn't a bad fight. I mean, I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't, my expectations weren't really high on Terrence Crawford and Spence, only because just the state of boxing. Like, we don't get those fights right away unless you're over at Matchroom with Eddie Hearn or Top Rank, which we already knew Crawford was already done with Top Rank. So that fight was not going to happen right away. So I figured it was going to take some time to get Crawford a promoter, to see who his options were, see who's going to pick him up, who's going to sign that fight. Was he going to do multi-fight deals with PBC? And we still don't know. Like, I think we were messaging each other yesterday, and not just that, but I also was seeing that supposedly Bud signed over to the BLK Prime. I don't know how true that is. I tried looking it up. Not sure how true that is. He's definitely fighting on that network. I don't blame him for staying busy. At the end of the day, I mean, look at their fighters. These guys fought in all their life. You put anybody in front of them, they're gonna fight them, no matter who it is. And Crawford's already unified before in a division. Why not? Why wouldn't he want to do this at another division at 147? So it's really hard to try to blame. I get both guys, have their side of the story. Like they say, two sides of the story to every situation. So it's really hard for me to try to at least blame the fighter. At the end of the day, I feel like the blame could be put on the promoters. I mean, the money, it's not like this isn't going to make money. I mean, come on, you got a pay-per-view fight in a Deontay Wilder and Helenius. Why is it so hard to put this Crawford fight in Spence? I get, at first he was being a little stubborn. He wanted certain things in that contract. He didn't get them. They said, if you want this fight, you're going to have to accept our, like he said here, the BS deals that you guys wanted. He accepted them. So why wouldn't he want to know or Al Haymon be transparent with him, especially knowing like how low these pay-per-view numbers are? If fighters aren't fighting all the time, it's like a money issue. So I mean, yeah, it's his money. I get he's rich, has nothing to do with us, but we don't understand that side of it. That side of boxing business. So I mean, why is it so damn hard to make this fight? I mean, there's no reason to try to make this fight or even try to build this fight up. It's already built up all the way as much. I mean, it's already built up all the way. Like, we already know what to expect when these two guys fight. I mean, it's 50-50. You have half people saying Spence, half people saying Crawford. I'm siding on the Crawford side, as I've been a Crawford fan. I like Crawford. But it's really hard to try to blame fighters. I mean, all these guys do is fight who they put in front of them. I mean, they could call out fighters. Sometimes they don't get those fights. Most of the especially if you're on PBC, you're not going to get every fight that you're calling for unless you got lucky and your name is Caleb Plant. You got to fight Canelo for the amount of money that he got. So again, like I said, man, it's really hard for me to try to blame somebody. I mean, I'm calling bullshit on both sides. These guys both want to fight each other, so it's not gonna happen this year. So I said it in the beginning of the year. I didn't think it was gonna happen this year. I thought maybe next year, maybe like early spring, maybe late spring. But let's see what happens, man, with this.
Damn, Georgie. So you called it, man. So it looks like there's really nobody to blame in particular, but if it is, it might be the promoters. But you knew this fight was not going to happen, huh?
I just had a feeling, man. I just had a feeling. It's just too good to be true. One of those things, And there's many other fights, right? I mean, there's a Tank and Garcia. Now they're negotiating. I won't believe it until they actually are walking in the ring, because shit can happen. Just look at what happened with Conor Ben and Eubanks. That fight was literally going to happen, and look what the fuck happened. So,
right, dude. I was trying to think of a time when a fight had taken so long to make and then like fell apart. Like, I remember Pacquiao and Mayweather kind of touching base on a fight, right, and then it falling apart. But I don't remember like months and months and months of negotiations only for it to fall apart, right? I mean, it would fall apart and then they would revisit it. Like, it seems to me like there was like too long of negotiations in my part. That's one thing. I felt like these negotiations went on for way too long. Like, I've seen fights be made very quickly. Like, there was something wrong here. And the other thing too is, there's all kinds of blame going around. So George, I mean, that's a really nice neutral stance that you have. I see a lot of people out there throwing blame on Spence versus Crawford. I heard one guy go, Anthony Yildirim. I'm like, what the fuck does Anthony Yildirim have to do with any of this shit? Like, I understand that you're pissed off that this fight isn't made, but like, there's no reason to focus on what Canelo did in the middle of a undisputed run, right? I mean, it's just bizarre. I'm hearing all kinds of stuff. There's also, I don't know, man, like there's a whole lot of stuff going on. But before we get into that, I want to talk to Nopal Boxeanos. Nopal, what do you think about this fight not being made? And do you blame anybody? I mean, you've heard both sides roughly. You've heard Spence talk. You've heard Crawford talk. What does Nopal have to say about this?
Well, for the record, I gotta start off by saying that
Nopal, can you hear us, brother? I don't mean to interrupt you, but I can't hear you, man. Well, while we're waiting on him, we can now, man. Go ahead and cook, brother.
So what I was saying is, for the record, I can't really say, hey, it's this guy's fault or that guy's fault. But what I can do is kind of lean it to one side a little bit, because I don't want to be biased about it, but there is a track record there of, we do know that Al Heyman is used to getting whatever he wants, basically being in full control. So with that in mind, whenever you go to negotiate with him, it's basically take it or leave it situation most of the time. It probably was that way with Canelo too. Just Canelo's a different type of fighter. He wants to fight that bad that he's willing to kind of not get paid all the way. And I know that people are like, what are you talking about, Nopal? He made $50 million. Well, I mean, he sold 850,000 pay-per-views. That's a lot of pay-per-views, man. And I think, what was it like? Was it like $89.95 pay-per-view? Like, it was the expensive one. I don't remember, but what I'm saying is, if Mayweather would have sold that, he would have made about like $100 million for that, probably. So Canelo left some money on the table, in my opinion. But what I'm saying is, with that in mind, you got a guy in.
Nopal, I don't know if you can hear us, brother, but you said you have a guy in something, then you broke up, man. While we're waiting on Nopal, man, I just want to point this out. This one guy had a tweet that I want to focus on. He said, this is from the Adams Boxing Show on Twitter. And he goes, if Floyd Mayweather can accept 50-50 deal with Manny Pacquiao in the first negotiations, right? That one fell apart because of the blood testing, right? How come Spence Crawford couldn't have been a 50-50 split? With a 50-50 split, the fight might have gotten done. It's all speculation, but you never know. And that's the other thing, man. There's a lot of pride on both sides, And, I mean, that's a great point. And here's something else I wanted to point out. They never had like their Mayweather versus Pacquiao meetup moment. They never had this moment where they're going to meet up and talk about it and see what they could do to get the fight done. It seems to me like, I don't know. I know that they both have each other's numbers. We saw that when they interacted with each other in an arena, right? They have each other's numbers. All of a sudden, they started piping up vocally on Twitter when both sides knew that, okay, this fight's over with. Crawford's going to be moving on. I think it's kind of sad. Man, I'm still disappointed. That's the other thing, too. Before I cook on this, Nopal, are you with us? Okay, here's something I want to say. Like, there's blame being put on both sides. But, one thing that I've noticed is that, like, there's a lot of people that aren't really all that upset that we're not getting the fight. I think that's the main thing. Like, we're not getting the fight, and that sucks. And I don't hear people lamenting that like me, right? Or, George, like, we want the fight, right? We want the fight. I like both fighters. I think Spence is going to win, and I want this fight. And there's just some bizarre things I'm hearing, like people are just so okay with this fight not happening. And it's like, dude, you know what? Slowly, boxing fans are being disgruntled. We're getting jaded. And I see it, man. I see it everywhere. Calix Boxing 2.0, a show I really like, man. He was so positive starting out, and he's just like got stuff, rightly so, to complain about, man. It's like, it's hard to be a boxing fan. Like, we wanted this fight bad. We're not getting it. And it gets frustrating over time. And here's the other thing that I hear that pisses me off. Some people are like, hey, well, can't blame Spence because you know what? Spence is so honest. He's always said he always does what he says he's going to do. Always. He's so honest. What does that mean? Like, okay, yeah, he said, I'm going to get to Crawford last. I'm going to take the easy route. Like, that doesn't make him this innocent guy. Like, yes, he waited out Crawford. He got to him last. They could have been negotiating. There's no reason then, I'm going to clean up my side of the street. I mean, that's ducking. Nobody wanted to see all those other fights, right? he was going to fight Pacquiao when Pacquiao wasn't even a champion. But I kind of get that fight. At the time, I said that, well, you got to make that fight. If you're going to fight Pacquiao, you got to take that fight. Right. But I mean, there were fights that we didn't care about. Nobody cared about the Danny Garcia fight. Nobody cared about the Sean Porter fight. Whether or not these guys had belts, like, nah, man, we wanted the Crawford fight. That's the fight we wanted. Errol Spence has never given us the fight that we wanted. And now he's like, well, I might move up. And his fans are just like, well, hey, we understand. He said, he said he was going to wait and clean up this side of the street, and Bud just wasn't available. So that's okay. Like, I don't buy that so much. Like, it's bizarre logic to me. It doesn't really add up. This whole like, oh, well, he's always done what he said he was going to do. Like, very bizarre to me. Nopal, are you with us? I think I hear him. Nopal,
I hear something. Definitely hear some.
He's
movement.
fumbling around, you know what I mean? But, I'd probably be a little more pissed off about this, but this is such an early show. And just so you guys
I'm
know.
having trouble connecting to the Wi-Fi, man. It just keeps cutting off every time I'm saying something.
Oh.
But, let me try to say it real quick. Like, I agree with you guys. Like, I hate it when I hear somebody just being really one-sided and putting the blame just on one person. You know what I mean? Like, it don't make sense. I think everybody's equally at fault. Spence is at fault for being a simp and not taking control of his career, not standing up to Al Heyman. I think Al Heyman is, always been at fault for blocking all these fights. And with Terrence Crawford, I think he's just a hard-headed dude that wants what he wants. He's been historically one of the most overpaid guys in history. He can't sell any kind of pay-per-views yet. He puts himself on such a pedestal. But in this situation, I guess he is a free agent, so he has a little bit of room. But I just, I get the feeling that he's not easy to work with either. So I put the blame on all these guys. This is not going to be an easy fight to make. So, in my opinion, I really don't care about this fight too much. I'm going to watch it for free anyway. So, when it comes, it comes,
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it's getting us to. Yeah, very true. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, man.
Yeah, that's what it's come to. Honestly, with boxing, it's almost like the fans are second, right? We got to remember at the end of the day, like, we're the ones that are buying the pay-per-views, we're buying the tickets, buying the merch. You have content creators creating content, putting out all this stuff out for people that can't go in and do these kinds of things. So like I said, we're being put second or even third or in the back seat. They got to realize we're the ones that are buying all these things. So yeah, like when you're just mentioning that, it's that they're teasing us or just not giving us the fights that we want or we're asking for. I get promoters do this because it's their cash cow. Because I mean, think about it, right? At 147, or Spence at 147 is pretty much only PBC's like big champion at 147. Yes, there was Danny Garcia. Yes, there was Ugas, but those were not names like a Earl Spence. Say Earl Spence fights somebody that's actually worth the risk. He loses. That's money lost to the promoter. That's honest. Like, in my head, that's the way I picture it. Especially with PBC, like, and of course that's 168. With Caleb Plant, I'm sure it was just like, okay, well, I got another guy at 168. This, I could make a lot of money because it's Canelo. Yeah, okay, Plant maybe deserved it, so let's go ahead and make it. And and the thing too is I remember kind of the deal, like it went away, it came back, and then they finally made it because in the negotiations, like, he was asking for more than one fight, or there was like certain things he was asking for the contract in the contract against Canelo. So Canelo turned it away. Remember, like, the fight didn't happen right away. I think, right?
Right.
There was, so that's what I remember. There was something in that negotiation or in that deal that Canelo didn't like, or he wanted Canelo to fight for PBC, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a big portion of the fans were blaming Canelo for they got their blame in there.
Of course, they always blame Canelo, bro.
They're like, Canelo's so selfish.
But Nopal, you made a really good point. Like, I also think Terrence Crawford might be difficult to work with. I feel like the guy has a lot of pride, and a lot of it rightly so. He's been pound for pound. He's very accomplished. But he thinks go ahead, Nopal.
Bro, he sued Bob Arum. How ironic is that, bro? The guy that was giving him money when he, for free, basically. He was overpaying the dude. He was giving him all kinds of free money, and he still has the nerve to sue him at the end. When things didn't work out. Like, who does that, bro?
Good call. And he resigned with them not too long ago, and then they finish out this part of the re-signing, and then he sues them on the way out. Like, one of the things that I've learned is like, do not burn your bridges, right? And he just burned that bridge, and it's like, well, then he comes over to Al Heyman, and it's like, does Al Heyman want to do so much business with Terrence Crawford? I mean, he is 35. He's not that marketable. So you have a guy who's aging out, where if he beats Spence, you have Crawford, who, I mean, maybe he gets that torch for a little bit, but he's not going to be around very long. He's not somebody who's very vocal. I mean, I don't consider him to be very charming. Like, he doesn't have very much charisma on the camera, and you're not going to make that much money with him. So it's like, he's kind of a liability too. Like, it's weird. So I could see this initial interaction between Al Heyman and Crawford not going that well, even if they're trying to like charm Crawford as he comes in. Crawford might have his guard up. He might be thinking, oh, like, these guys only care about Spence. Like, they don't care about me. Well, yeah, I mean, they haven't worked with you and you're 35, so you've been with Top Rank your whole career. So I had a feeling that the initial meetings weren't going to go so well. All right. And so now we've learned, as the move, it all happened very quickly, but the news cycle moved on, and now we're going to get Terrence Crawford versus David Avanesyan. This is the fight that we're getting. It's happening kind of quick, which is nice, in Omaha, Nebraska, December 10th. So what do we think about this fight? George, what do you think about Avanesyan as an opponent? Do you consider it like a stay busy fight? How do you feel about this fight?
I mean, yeah, obviously it is a stay busy fight. And again, Crawford really doesn't have a home as far as who he's fighting for, like a promoter. I mean, I've never really heard of BLK. I was actually on Twitter a little while ago, just kind of researching some things, or maybe I came across something, and I actually came across a little bit of something like Calix. We know Calix. Like, he's big on BLK. I don't know if he's being sarcastic, but he was, going through the page. I mean, I could be wrong, but he was like, hey, you know what? First person here, like, I'm backing BLK. Like, they have a good fourth quarter of fights lined up, and just backing them. And I don't know. Again, it goes back to Crawford not really having a home. Is Crawford actually signed to them like a multi-fight deal, or is it just this, one time? We'll give you the money. We'll give you this money. And right, I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong. The money is pretty good for this fight against Avanesyan. But I guess I don't know. See, I guess as this fight comes, or as this fight gets more built up, and when it comes to it, I think we'll get more information on it. Like, is it a multi-fight deal? We know Adrian Broner just signed with them. But as far as the fight, yes, it is a stay busy fight. He's not a champion. It's not the fight we're asking for. But just I've heard of Avanesyan. Avanesyan was actually supposed to be Virgil Ortiz's opponent. And I think Ortiz ended up fighting. No, he ended up getting hurt. No, he got sick. And he ended up fighting somebody else. The other guy, I can't remember his damn name, but Avanesyan is in the top 10. I mean, in the WBC, he's number 4. And the WBO, he's ranked 6th. And then the WBA, I mean, the IBF, he's 8. So I mean, it's not a fighter that we know. It's not a Keith Thurman. It's not a Ennis. It's not a Ortiz. It's not a Ugas. It's not a Conor Ben. But it's the name. Some of us know who he is. I've never really seen his fights other than a highlight, because he was gonna fight Ortiz. So I was like, okay, let's see what kind of opponent Ortiz is gonna fight. Avanesyan isn't that bad of a fighter. He does have 3 losses. He lost to Lamont Peterson. He lost to Kavaliauskas. At the time, Kavaliauskas was undefeated. So I mean, it doesn't really say much. But again, it's not a fight that none of us know. Obviously, he's not a guy that's marketed like a Keith Thurman. I don't see an issue with it. I mean, he's got to stay busy. There was complaints saying, if he doesn't fight in 2022, does he get kicked out of the rankings? I mean, there's so many different things that everybody's just have to say, but it's a stay busy fight. I mean, I guess until what really happened, until we know what really happens or happened in the Spence negotiations and what really messed that up. I mean, stay busy. Why not?
You are right, George. Avanesyan, for all intents and purposes, is a top 10 fighter according to ESPN and BoxRec, I believe. And in the sanctioning bodies, he's higher than that in a lot of them. So he is a formidable opponent, even though none of us really know who this guy is. I haven't seen. I looked at his box rec. I didn't recognize any of those fights with like the last handful. Like I just haven't seen them. I just haven't, right? And even though like
Yeah.
the welterweight division is hot and we're all kind of paying attention and we know of all these like undefeated welterweights who don't fight each other, Avanesyan's there with his losses, but he still kind of crept up on me. I was like, Avanesyan, I kind of know that name. That's how I felt. Like I knew the name. That's where I was with it. No ball. What do you think about this fight? Well, wow, no, Paul. Oh.
Okay. What was that, Chicano?
How do you feel about this fight, brother?
I'm okay with it because what else are we gonna get? So it's like whatever. But yeah, it's another easy fight for Terrence Crawford. Basically, he's gonna go in there and whoop this dude. I mean, stay busy fight. I'm cool with it. In the meantime, I guess but disappointed. Disappointed because what fight we want, but it is what it is.
I have a concern that this fight might not even pop off. I understand that BLK is moving quickly and they must have some money behind them, right? And when you enter the market, you got to start off paying high profile fighters a lot of money. We saw that with Jay-Z. He paid, if I recall, Andre Ward and Cotto some good money. 50 Cent was like that with Gamboa. Like you got to come in and start paying some high profile fighters to fight with you. But I mean, it never really tends to work out. Can they pull off a pay-per-view event like this in such a short amount of time? Like, I think it might be possible. Here's the one thing. Like, I am happy for the Nebraskans to get Bud Crawford back over there. So they're fighting at the Chai Health Center, which is a pretty decent sized arena. It's bigger than the last place he fought at when he fought in Omaha. So I think he could fill it up. People out there might be hungry for a nice winter fight. Bud Crawford is well known. Also, my dad lives in Nebraska. I've always wanted to see Terrence Crawford. I might go to Nebraska in the middle of winter to go see this fight. Possibly. We'll see. Could be good, but then I don't, we'll see what people think. There's some Mexicans. My dad, when he goes over there, he says that there's some Mexicans that show up, but we'll see. I've always wanted to see Crawford. He's a real talent. I have my doubts as to whether this fight's actually going to pop off for some reason. I don't want to say I don't have any faith in a app and BLK Prime, but they got to put it together very quickly. Rick Glazer's come out and he's shouting out BLK Prime and kind of pointing out what you guys pointed out. Hey, there's a Crawford signing as well as a Broner signing, and now BLK Prime is on the tip of everyone's tongue and finger. This is a strategy that's working brilliantly in branding. Well, we're all talking about it. That's for damn sure. I know that a lot of Spence fans who were shitting on Crawford for months and months, they kind of did a U-turn on this because, well, we got to talk about it. I mean, and I don't really like talking about other channels, but it's part of the news. There's a part of the news that a lot of this got revealed that there's a gentleman named Blue Blood who's never said anything about me. He doesn't even know who I am or we are. I've always liked his content. Seems like a real nice guy. Seems knowledgeable. Tries to drop news when he can. There's kind of a pivot going on, and he's getting a lot of heat saying, hey, all of a sudden now you're promoting Crawford. Because I think that the idea is that a lot of Spence fans for a long time have been shitting on Crawford, and now all of a sudden they're going to have to start promoting this fight. And so there's a shift going on. Some people don't like the shift, and it's pretty contentious over there. Like I've been paying attention, and it's quite entertaining, if you want to see. It's kind of ugly. It's a little ugly, like having people like, fall in line, you know what I mean? But like, I don't know, dude. Like, what do you think about Rick Glazer, who said that he's actually going to be joining BLK Prime? What do you think about that, George?
Yeah, I know Rick Glazer's. He's been an advisor. He's in the boxing world, whether you like him or not. Like he's pretty well known. People know who he is. I mean, I'm not saying he's my favorite guy and he's the best guy out there, but I mean he's pretty well known. He's pretty respected when it comes to boxing. I think for me, I would put him over Dan Rafael if anything. So I mean, if he's backing it, I mean, why not, man? Like I said, it's got to be something. There's got to be something to it that we don't know yet. Like you said, they have some kind of money. Julian texted me something yesterday. Of course, we go back and forth with the boxing stuff. And I guess Terrence Crawford is financed, or he's in with SVP. I was trying to look it up to see who it was, but I guess the Silicon Valley Bank or whoever it is. I might be wrong. Don't quote me on it, but I guess they manage him, and they're worth like $17 billion. So I don't know if that's something that is parallel with BLK, or I don't know. But Rick Glazer, I don't have an issue with him. I know some guys go back and forth with them, but it's Rick Glazer.
No, Paul, what do you think about Rick Glazer, man?
I think he's a funny guy on Twitter. That's about it, bro. That's all I got on the Glass Man. I mean,
Wow.
he's very entertaining on Twitter.
Yeah.
I think sometimes he reaches. He likes to say that he's like, this big mafia boxing dude. And, I think I like him, though. I think he's cool.
Well, there's a lot of fake mobsters out there. What are you going to do?
True that.
Well, here's the other thing I wanted to talk about. And before that, I want to give a shout out to Team Batman Boxing, who says it's a terrible fight for Crawford. Always in a stay busy fight other than Porter. Interesting, man. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And there's news about Jared Ennis and what his intentions are. Now we do know that Spence needs a dance partner. Jared Ennis has sent an official petition to the IBF requesting that they order Errol Spence to defend against him as the IBF mandatory challenger next, because the Terrence Crawford fight isn't happening. This is according to his father, Derek Bozy Ennis. And this is something I'm actually happy about, because I got to say this, for the IBF, who always kind of like puts a wrench in when fighters are trying to go undisputed because they always throw out the mandatory right away. Errol Spence has been sitting on his IBF title for years without defending it against the mandatory. Years. And Ennis was a guy he still has a whole lot of hype. All of a sudden, people aren't excited about that prospect. People are talking about Stanionis. People are talking about Spence potentially moving up like he said he was going to. What do you think about all this, George?
Yeah, I know Jared Ennis needs some kind of, like a spark to, not just a spark, but people know who he is. He needs that dance partner, like you said. So does Errol Spence. He's not shy. He's not shy about saying who he wants to fight. They're both in the IBF. He's taking advantage of the opportunity to say, I'm the mandatory, that I'll take the mandatory challenge at that sanctioning. I like Jared Ennis. And then for me, like you mentioned, Stanionis was promised a fight against Errol Spence because he stepped aside to let the Ugas and Spence fight happen. So, I guess the deal was, okay, I'll step aside, Ugas and Spence a fight. I want to fight on the undercard, and he did fight on the undercard. And he says, all I want is to be able to be next in line against Errol Spence. I don't know. Either one of those fights is good. I think he's Stanionis is kind of like an Avanesyan. Nobody really knows who he is. Maybe you've seen a fight or a highlight. He's a tough competitor. Yes, he's undefeated, but nobody's really gonna know these guys until they actually fight somebody like a Errol Spence or like a Terrence Crawford. So I don't see an issue with the Stanionis. If I had a choice between the two, I definitely would want to see the boots. So more power to him. If he gets it, that'd be crazy. That would be very crazy, because now we get to see what Ennis is really all about. And then as far as like the 154, I think he's been mentioning that. I think his career has been at 147. So yeah, he's been killing himself to stay at that division. So we'll see.
It would be a hot fight. Crawford versus Ennis. Ennis had a lot of hype, man, and all of a sudden people aren't excited about this prospect. I feel like the same people who are secretly relieved that the Spence versus Crawford fight isn't happening secretly don't want Spence versus Ennis. I say throw them in there together. That's what I want. But you're right. As far as Stanionis, like nobody really knows who he is that much, especially as far as like the mainstream goes. Like the hardcores might like that fight and that matchup, but there's really not that many exciting fights. And I don't think anybody wants a Thurman fight. George, you made it sound earlier like we just might get that fight anyways. That fight would suck. I'd be personally disappointed in Spence if he made that fight. No, Paul, what do you think about the idea of Spence potentially fighting Ennis? Do you think Spence would actually get in the ring with Ennis right now? Or do you think
I
he's going to
don't
move
think
up?
so, bro. I think that he would look for a way to duck that somehow. And Al Heyman and them guys, they have a magical way to, pay off probably the sanctioning body so they won't, make their guys defend against these fighters who are like harder. If it was just a sorry ass fight where, versus somebody that he could easily beat, I mean, he would take it no problem. But I don't think that he would take that fight, to be honest. I'm not saying that Boots beats him. I'm just saying that they don't want to risk. They're looking to cash out with Terrence Crawford. Basically, that's what they're looking for. That's what they want. That's the only high risk fight that they want.
Yeah,
But I
worth
would
the
be
money.
happy if he fought Boots. You know what I mean? That would be a great fight. And I wouldn't mind being wrong about that.
Well, Boots looks like a killer, but then again, he's fought a bunch of nobodies, right? Cans, right? So, I mean, it would be like a high step up in competition, that's for sure. Spence, he's elite. And Ennis has never even sniffed an elite fighter as far as his professional record goes. I mean, so it would be interesting, and would he get that much credit? I mean, we all really like Ennis, and I don't know. I mean, he's definitely top 10. I guess it would depend on how Ennis plays out the rest of his career. Like, he could lose to Spence and then go on to have a great career. We don't know much about him as far as what he could do at the top level.
Yeah, like because his last couple of fights have been guys that aren't even at the 147 division. Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah, and they
Lorme
get
and the
clipped,
last
and we
guy he
don't learn
fought.
much.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly. I mean, you don't ever want to see a guy. I mean, that's right. That's when you want to see what he could do when he gets tested, and he hasn't been tested because he's been blowing these guys out of the water. So they're perfect. They're perfect for him. I mean, I always use the analogy or the phrase the eye test. Yes, he passes the eye test. He looks good throwing combinations. He blows these guys out of the water in 2 rounds. But let's see we'll see what you're all about. And I could be totally wrong, but I made like comparison of him and Andre Berto when Andre Berto first came out. Like Andre Berto
yeah.
was destroying guys and then he finally came across a challenge. He got his chin checked, and then from there on, he's been, he's had a up down career, but a pretty good career. I mean, I'm not saying that's what Boots is gonna be, but it kind of reminds me of the same thing because Berto was
Yeah.
blowing these guys out of the water the same way that Boots is. I mean, Boots is doing the same. So
And I'm
I
glad that
hope the best for him.
And I'm glad that you bring this up, George, because I like to remind people that with these fighters, sometimes they're in a phase where they're knocking everybody out, but they still have the element of surprise. They haven't fought enough people to get exposed for their weaknesses to be shown. And a lot of times, guys like Spence, who are undefeated or whatever, they do not want to necessarily fight a guy like that because they haven't seen him fight enough to be able to say, hey, he's weak right here or whatever, because Boots hasn't fought those kind of guys that can expose that sort of thing. So what we do see historically is guys like you said, Andre Berto, till he got exposed by somebody, up to that level. And that's the thing with Boots Ennis. And I don't think that, same thing as Floyd. I mean, he could have fought him too, but he just chose he could have fought Andre Berto. And I'm not saying that Andre Berto would have beat him. I'm not saying that
Well, while we wait for Nopal to come back, I want to give a shout out to Team Batman Boxing, who's in the house. And he says that Boots is a very dangerous opponent for anyone at 147. Wouldn't be surprised at all if he could beat Spence. Man, you know what? I have to think about that fight a little more. It's like I don't have enough information to go off of, but I hear you there. I mean, it could happen. As it's like George said, as far as the eye test goes, he looks great. Want to give a shout out to Puro Sur Central, who's in the house. And he said he would prefer Boots, hopefully without his O. Ennis would fight the other contenders. And Nando Yamas, who's listening at work. And see, Nando didn't even know that Boots was the Mando. I mean, he's been the Mando for a little bit now. Ennis activated it, and I think right now is the time to make it happen. Why not? We don't know how much longer Spence is going to be at 147 pounds. If he's not going to fight Crawford, let's throw Ennis in there. He's undefeated. He's a good-sized welterweight, too. He's 5'10", and he's already 25 years old. There shouldn't be any holdup, if you ask me. Let's get it going.
Yeah.
Nopal, you have any final thoughts on this one, brother? Well, hey, I want to move on, man. That was a good topic. But dude, there's some other news that we got to cover before we get to our fight of the year segment. I want to talk about Deontay Wilder's pay-per-view buys. They are in. We got the news, y'all. We got the news. Let me show you the tweet here. It looks like, according to Dan Raphael, who was holding out on how many pay-per-view buys this was, even though he had the Canelo numbers quite early, people thought that maybe he was on the PBC take. A lot of people thought that was possible, but the numbers came out. Deontay Wilder versus Helenius reportedly did about 75,000 pay-per-view buys in the U.S. George, what do you think about these numbers?
I'm not surprised at all. I honestly was expecting a little bit lower. Come on. Again, if you can make a pay-per-view, a Deontay Wilder and Helenius, well, then what's the holdup on the Spence and Crawford? Like, I mean, come on. Just get that shit done. It doesn't surprise me. As far as, I mean, PBC, they've been failing, badly with the pay-per-view numbers. The only person they really have as far as a pay-per-view opponent or a pay-per-view fighter is obviously Spence, and his numbers have been dropping as well over the last couple of years because, like you mentioned, Chicano, he's not taking the fights that we're asking. He's taking, okay, no disrespect to Porter, no disrespect to Ugas, no disrespect to Danny Garcia, but those were not the fights that we're asking for. Yeah, he fought Ugas for a belt, but I mean, those are the fights that we're asking for, and it just, in my mind, I mean, there's just so many things I think about when it comes to PBC and their pay-per-view. Like one, it's obligations to these networks that they make contracts with, that they're putting up all this money so that way they can get money to come back in, and it's not coming in. So what is Al Heyman doing? He's putting on pay-per-views, hoping that can pay these networks back for the money that they invested in the PBC and their fighters. I'm even hearing that PBC fighters are not re-signing, or they're not even signing new fighters. I don't even remember the last time a new up and coming fighters signed to PBC. Everybody's going to Top Rank, so that just tells you right there the state of PBC. Someone said 8 years. I would say less than 8 years. What PBC has, I mean, I think what the other guys like Charlo and maybe the other guys that are not fighting all the time are just trying to wait this contract out and just, you know what, I'm just gonna fight once a year, fuck it, and I'll just, once it's done, maybe I'll go somewhere else. But as far as these numbers, man, they're terrible. Like, why is this on pay-per-view? I mean, it should have been like a Showtime or a Fox or a Fox Sports one. I don't know. Pay-per-view is ridiculous. It's stupid, but this is what happens. These are the numbers you get.
You're
when
right.
It's not pay-per-view worthy.
Terrible numbers, right? At least we can say that we know that these are the numbers that Wilder would bring in by himself, because nobody is going to pay pay-per-view for Robert Helenius. That's for damn sure, right? So, I mean, these are purely Deontay Wilder's numbers. 75,000 is kind of disappointing, although I thought that the undercard was kind of decent. You have Plant versus Durrell. I thought that was pretty decent for a pay-per-view. I'm very disappointed in these numbers. I expected, well, no, I kind of agree with you, George. Like, I knew it was going to do under 100,000, but I was secretly hoping that it would do better than this. Like 75,000 is terrible. Like, these are just bad numbers. And, we've been hearing online that Wilder is the face of boxing. Like, we know that's not true. I've actually had my doubts about how big Joshua versus Wilder would be. A lot of people think that's a great fight to make, and it is. But I think if you made that fight here in America, I don't really know how big that fight would be, to be honest with you. I think that's a big, like, UK fight. But as far as like pay-per-view buys, like, I don't know. I have my doubts about it being such a huge fight. I think the days of Deontay Wilder being like this premier star, they might be winding down. Like, he needs to have a dance partner that can bring in some money. Deontay Wilder versus Ruiz might be the fight to make next. I mean, it seems like the logical one. He even mentioned Ruiz afterwards. Ruiz is talking about how he wants to fight. The WBC is talking about how they want that fight. It could be the fight to make. Nopal, what do you think about these pay-per-view buys and Deontay Wilder possibly facing Andy Ruiz next?
Well, just like George, I'm very surprised that it even did that. I'd like to say that I think the numbers were lower than that. I don't even believe it, But if it did do 75,000, I think that's pretty good, considering that he fought Robert Helenius. I mean, you have to take into consideration that versus the absolute top guy, Tyson Fury. I mean, how much did the first one sell? I mean, it only sold like 300,000 buys, right? So That's not even Canelo numbers by itself, And really, I gotta say that he must have one hell of a team behind him. I mean, they definitely back him up because to let him do a pay-per-view with that type of dude, you know. So technically, whatever it takes, they're making him a pay-per-view guy. I won't say star because I get, he can't sell too much, but he's still a pay-per-view guy because you can't watch him for free. So, shouts out to his team for, always being there for him.
I agree. Deontay Wilder seems to have a very strong team behind him. He seems to me to be one of the only PBC fighters who can kind of call his own shots or be vocal about what he wants to do, about fighting fighters that are on the other side of another network. I really like the moves that he makes and at least how he talks. And like I said, as far as American draws go, I think he has charisma, and I'm a big fan of Deontay Wilder. George, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I mean, I think, I mean, of course, we know what Deontay Wilder brings to the table. It's excitement, it's knockouts, it's highlights. Um, I remember last week's show was the conspiracy, right? I mean, I think I'm just going with my conspiracy right here. I mean, I think they already knew they were going to be behind on this. Gets the first round knockout, takes no damage, but then again, that's Deontay Wilder. He's gonna, he's got that much power that he can hurt you that way. But I mean, I think, and you said the card wasn't a bad card. It really wasn't a bad card. Like not just Caleb Plant, but there was the other guys that were on that card. I think Frank Sanchez, former Reynoso fighter. He's another heavyweight that's pretty exciting to watch. So it wasn't like the card was that terrible compared to other cards that we've seen that were pay-per-view. So I think if this was free, like I think we would see at least the view numbers, a lot higher than that, but you can't make this shit pay-per-view, especially this.
Right. This fight was not supposed to be on pay-per-view anyways. Nopal, you got any final thoughts about your king, the champ, Deontay Wilder?
Nothing. I mean, he's a hell of a dude, though. I gotta say that before, after I hated on his selling ability. I mean, he's a hell of a dude. We like him, and I think he's great for boxing.
You said it. Want to give a shout out to JC who's joined us. And now let's talk about what's coming up this weekend. The return of the Matrix, Lomanchenko. He's coming back, and I'm excited about it. I want to see Lomanchenko back in action. Loma takes Manhattan. He's fighting at the Hulu Theater at Madison Square Garden this Saturday night. He's fighting against Jermaine Ortiz, who I don't know anything about. Okay, I'm just going to be honest. Let's see if George knows anything about his opponent. George, what do you think about this fight?
Yeah, I've actually seen two of his fights. He was the last guy to beat Jamel Herring,
All
on
right,
the
cool.
Janabek undercard. And this morning I was watching a couple more highlights, and then I remember seeing that he actually fought another prospect, in Ardonio. I think he's a Cuban or Puerto Rican fighter, so he's definitely out there. I think that was his only blemish on his record, which was a draw. So he's got like 18 wins. I think maybe like 12 knockouts, maybe 10 knockouts. It should be exciting. I mean, I would say if Lomachenko doesn't, if he takes him lightly, it could definitely be a long night for Lomanchenko. But this is gonna be the Lomachenko show. He's gonna show that he's in there with a young fighter that actually is really good, that can fight. And he's just it's gonna be a showcase for him, and we all know what's big to come. So I'm excited for this one.
All right, Nopal, Loma's back, baby. What do you think?
Man, I just hope that he wins in like spectacular fashion. Hopefully, we can get him versus Devin Haney. And I'm happy to see him back.
Me too, man. I'm gonna watch the fight. I've always liked his style. I hope he doesn't do that whole like, oh hey, I'm whooping this guy's ass, throwing the towel. Like I don't want to see that shit anymore.
Yeah.
That shit pissed me
get him
off. Like
out
I
of
know who
there.
you think you are. Like you go in there and you take care of business, right? I thought it was like, I think it was kind of like I don't know, virtue signaling. I didn't care for it at all. I don't want to see that again. But besides that, I like Lomachenko. I think he's run out of excuses. I think he needs to just breeze past this dude and let's get the Devin Haney fight next. Sounds like Loma wants it. sounds like Haney is staying at 135 just for this fight. So I get excited about the prospect of Haney versus Lomachenko. And I don't want to hear any excuses if Loma does beat Haney and Haney's like, well, I was weight trained. I stayed too long at this division, and I'm starting to see that be a trend. Spence said that same thing, like, oh, I've been waiting too long at this division. Like, no, dude, you're staying there for an advantage. I don't want to hear it. But as far as Lomachenko goes, I'm very excited to see him back. I want to see what he can bring to the table. He's getting older, so he's got to make things happen now. But he seems to me to be a fighter who wants to fight everybody. So this is a nice little fight for, a lull in the fourth quarter of 2022. Anybody got any final thoughts on Lomachenko before we wrap this one up?
No.
All right. Well, I want to give a shout out to Nando Yamas, who says, well, actually, he's just working and listening still, which is good, and he's giving a shout out to JC, which we appreciate, man. Well, I'll tell you what, man, let's get into the fight of the year. Now, as you guys know, we go back and review fights of the year for entertainment purposes, right? We like to give you a little bit of history, but we're going to go and take a look at 1938. We're going to take a look at it. Henry Armstrong versus Lou Ambers. And this is the first lightweight fight that we've taken a look at, all right? Now, y'all are looking at a legend. It's my pleasure to introduce Henry Armstrong, Hank Armstrong. I'm sure you've probably heard of him. Also known as Homicide Hank, Hurricane Hank, and Hammer and Hank. Okay, now this guy, he's the man, all right? Now, you can see here, he was the first man to wear 3 pugilistic crowns at one time. At one time, he was the featherweight champion, the lightweight champion, and the welterweight champion of the world. Very impressive stuff. And he actually went on to defend his welterweight title 18 times. Now, he's the son of an African-American sharecropper, and his mother was a full-blooded Iroquois, which is in the northeast of the United States. So I didn't know that he was half indigenous. That struck me as very interesting, okay? But very smart guy who was an honor student, decided to get into fighting. And in 1938, right, which we're looking at, he went to the welterweight division, and at 133.5 pounds, won the welterweight championship. And then after that, he went on to fight the fight that we're about to review versus Lou Ambers. And then he subsequently vacated at 126. And then in the middle of this, he actually tried to go up to middleweight to win a championship there. But what ended up happening was a controversial draw. A lot of the press say that Henry Armstrong got a raw deal on that one. And then he went on to lead a quiet retirement, was a born-again Christian. And yeah, man, he seemed very low profile, but very interesting fight style. But let's go on to talk about this fight that we're about to review. Henry Armstrong versus Lou Ambers for the lightweight title, okay? Now, Henry Armstrong at the time was 91, 12, and 7 at 28 years old. And he's going up against Ambers, whose real name, well, he was Italian, right? And he didn't want his mama to find out that he was fighting. So his real name was Luigi Giuseppe D'Ambrosio. And he took the name because he didn't want his mom to find out. So he went under the name of the Hermiker Hurricane. So we got 2 hurricanes going at it with each other. And you can tell these guys are pretty friendly with each other. And Luigi, or Ambers, as he's known, is 75, 6, and 7, and he's 5'4". Well, I did not mention that Henry Armstrong came in at 5'5". So 2 chaparros, and this was one hell of an interesting fight. It was the first time that I saw Henry Armstrong fight, and I have some opinions about his fight style, which I was not anticipating the fight style that I saw. Well, I didn't know what to anticipate, but man, I haven't seen anything like it. George, what did you think of the fight itself and Henry Armstrong's fighting style?
Yeah. First, we're watching, of course, we go back and we watch these videos that YouTube provides for us, and some of the channels that are out there that have these old fights, salute to these guys. But I couldn't really find a full video. We did I know you guys found the 9-minute video as well. So when I ran through that 9-minute video, I kind of looked at the same things you did, and I wrote this, the same information on him. But I did read a little bit more into the actual fight. They say, well, so I'll speak on what I saw. And yeah, his style, I wasn't expecting that kind of style either. They said he has a great engine, a great gas tank, and it showed in this fight. Ambers, being a tough competitor, and in this one you can definitely tell that what they mentioned about this fight between Ambrose and Armstrong, that this was one of, well, Armstrong actually said this is his toughest fight after he retired. That against Ambrose is the one title that was one of the toughest fights for him. That he goes back, you know, and I feel like every great fighter has that one fight that they mentioned that was their toughest opponent, and this was definitely his toughest opponent. It was a good back and forth. And the rounds that I was able to see, I think it was like 8 through 15, but they were shortened the rounds up a little bit. It was great stuff that what I thought Armstrong did, and this is my first time seeing Henry Armstrong as well. And we always hear his name. Teddy Atlas is calling him probably one of the greatest fighters ever. One of the greatest fighters. So, I mean, I'm not saying everything that Teddy Atlas says is true, but when he speaks, kind of, uh, plants the seed and makes you wonder, see who this guy really is. Um, and he did really good in this fight. I mean, I wish I could have tried to score it the way I did in the last one, but just watching it, I definitely see that Armstrong was doing a lot of great things. His combinations, he likes to get on the inside. Um, and I know one of the big things there was the low blows. I think there was like 8 low blows or maybe 5 low blows that happened in this fight. I didn't really see any of the low blows. And Amber's was dropped, I think, twice early on in this fight, and in the 11th round or 12th round, Armstrong was rocked pretty hard. So it was a good back and forth fight. I mean, I wish I could score it higher because I mean I definitely love the history on this, but I think just being able to see the shortened, I would say like not even half of the fight on video is what made it a little tough for me because I definitely know there was a lot more to this other than being able to read. I love to use my imagination sometimes, or when I'm reading, and I had to kind of use my imagination on this, but knowing the history of Armstrong, like I would have loved to seen what he did in this fight. Um, I guess if I'm gonna grade this, I'm gonna. I mean, I hate to do it like out of a 1 through 10. I'm gonna give it a 5 only because we didn't get to see the full fight. But I'm sure if this was um full 15 rounds, and you can see it in the fight and the rounds that we were able to see, it was definitely back and forth. But all in all, man, great stuff. Henry Armstrong. I'm hoping that maybe there's more fights later on down the road that we're going to be able to see because I'm looking forward to seeing what else we have in store with Armstrong.
That's great context, George. Thank you very much. Well, George, he doesn't mean anything by it, but he's giving it a 5-star out of 10-star rating for entertainment value. Something to think about. Great context. And you're right. Armstrong was penalized for 3 rounds for fouls, and there's not really any film on it. So we didn't get a chance to see the low blows if they were in fact low blows. And Ambrose was knocked down in 5 and 6. And I don't recall seeing that.
Yeah.
From what I saw in the film, like I felt like it was kind of a one-sided fight in a way. Nopal, what did you think about the fight? I mean, I know we only had 10 minutes, but what did you think of the fight itself and Henry Armstrong's style?
Oh, there was one thing too. I read in it. I don't know if you saw this because they didn't show it in the corner, but I think it was the 13th round that he had like a really severe cut in the inside of his mouth, and the referee was almost close to wanting to stop this because like he was bleeding pretty bad, and he told his corner not to put the mouthpiece in his mouth because when he was getting hit, it was like shooting blood out, and it just made it look more dramatic.
Which fighter was this?
Armstrong.
Very interesting. The other thing I wanted to say too is like such a hot crowd, man. That crowd really loved it. Like you could tell they were pro Lou Ambers when it was back and forth and even. They liked the back and forth, but when it was starting to get one-sided, then they would only cheer for Ambers. But man, that crowd was just rocking. They were really into that fight, and it was very entertaining. Like this was like a phone booth type fight. Really interesting to see Armstrong come in with his head down. He came in like he looked like I mean, actually, he did get hit with an uppercut a number of times from what I saw. But man, like the way he would just kind of come in, like I mean, his head movement wasn't like I don't know, like who am I thinking of? Jack Dempsey, right? Or James Toney. Like he was just kind of it was very bizarre. Like I did not anticipate his style to come in and like just get his head knocked, right? But I think he was ultimately trying to get to Amber so that he could do what I think Spence can do very well, which I think would work good against Crawford is get his head over to Crawford's like shoulder bone right here, his collarbone, and then just start digging. Also, he was really good at kind of like, and I said this too about Spence, which is really good. You know, Spence can kind of tuck his hands like this, right? His elbows, and then kind of break holds and dig. And I think that Henry Armstrong is very good at that. There was a rematch in this fight. There was a rematch for this one, and then that one went to Ambers, but that one was also controversial, right? It was controversial because there was a lot of low blows and there was penalizations. Henry Armstrong was penalized in the 2nd, 5th, 7th, 9th, and 11th round. So in 1939, they did fight again, but I don't know, man. Like I'd be curious to go back, but it's hard for us to kind of make a decision on those types of things because we simply don't have the information to go back and look at the whole fight film and come up with their own conclusions about what happened. And one of the things that I've learned about as far as like reading historical boxing books is you really can't trust the press back then. You just can't, right? And so I'm not going to. I don't care if the majority of the press says something. Like I have to see it with my own eyes to draw my own conclusions. No, Paul, you got any thoughts, brother?
It was a great little fight, and I gotta say sorry, guys. The damn Wi-Fi, Taco Bell Wi-Fi over here. It was a good little fight. Yeah, he did surprise me with the style. He was lunging in with his head, stuff like that. Digging into the guy Amber's chest. Hell of a chin though, to be able to have be a champ in 3 simultaneous weight classes is, he had a hell of a chin. Featherweight and welterweight at the same time. What's that, like a 20-pound difference almost?
Yeah, 126.
And boxing the way he did, man, he had that Native American chin, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that I thought he was, full-blooded African American, but as you said, it turns out he's half Native American, which is super cool, because that's close to the type of heritage we got, and I'm surprised that he doesn't get more props, by the supposed historians of boxing that we have on, the people that say that they love, the old school boxers and stuff like that. I'm surprised that they don't talk a little bit more about Henry Armstrong,
This guy was so damn busy to be like a simultaneous champion and fight like sometimes back to back to back. Like, very impressive to see this guy being so busy and to have 3 different titles at the same time. And this isn't when there's a bunch of trinkets. We're talking about like the champion at these divisions. Super impressive. Super impressive. And George, to answer your question, unfortunately, this will be the last time that we see Henry Armstrong in any fight of the year, right? But he goes on to do a lot of defenses at welterweight. Like, he still has a very decent career. Like, this isn't where he peaks and then goes downhill. Like, he's still doing really well. Even though he had a handful of losses, especially early, and had some freckled losses. Very impressive career. Amazing how active these guys are. And it's amazing how often we see some of these historical fighters go back and revisit fighters that they've already beaten either clearly or maybe kind of closely. And they throw them in there again into very large crowds. Like, we sit there and get really upset about Tyson Fury versus Chisora again, right? But back in the day, I mean, it could have been commonplace to fight a guy that you've already fought and beat a couple times because you need to stay busy. And there is some historical precedent with that we're learning about. So, any final thoughts on the great Henry Armstrong before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, none.
All right. Well, we salute Henry Armstrong, and who knows, we might go back and maybe take a look. I'm learning about controversial fights that we didn't know about through the press or through articles. So maybe there'll be a fight we could review of his possibly down the line. I wouldn't mind seeing that rematch on my own time. And when things slow down, I have this little notebook of fights that I want to go make a point of seeing. So that is about a half hour of film, if I remember correctly, and that's also a 15-round fight. So we're not going to be able to see the whole fight, but we'll get to see a little bit more. And next up, we're going to 1939, and we're going to take a look at Joe Louis. Once again, Joe Louis is back against Bob Pastor at Big Stadium in Michigan, Detroit. It's the first 20-round heavyweight title bout in 25 years. They're bringing back the 20-rounders for this one. Or excuse me, the 20-round fights, 20 rounds for this one, dude. So I'm excited about this one. That's how they're promoting it. So we're going to take a look at Joe Louis versus Bob Pastor. And if y'all want to take a look at that fight and then watch it back with us, we can talk about it, man. I'm excited for this one. Well, this is the Al Chile crew, And we're going to be signing off. Everybody have a great day. Peace.